So everybody, welcome. This chapter is one of my all-time favorites. Of course, they're all my all-time favorites. It's called The Yoga of the Supreme Person, and this is chapter 15. We have 3 more chapters left, and we'll be finishing this series on the Bhagavad-gītā. And then we'll start a series within a week or two later on the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're going to do selected stories from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And I think we'll have a really good time with that. So, Yoga of the Supreme. What do you think about that? The Yoga of the Supreme Person, chapter 15. So we have 3 more chapters left. And then we're going to start a series of selected stories in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which we can relish together, okay, in the next few weeks. So I'll start reading. There's only 20 verses in this chapter. So it's a pretty short little chapter. Some of these last ones are fairly short. The last chapter is pretty long, and then there's another chapter coming up, Divine and Demoniac, like that. That's a little long. But this one's very simple, and Krishna has repeated himself over and over to Arjuna, as we shall see as we study through this particular chapter. So I'll start with text 1. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "It is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upwards and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas." And we'll come back to that verse at the end, once we finish the verses together. Text 2, the branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. So one thing I'll stop here and mention just briefly, and we'll discuss this at length in a minute. But the banyan tree in India, has anybody seen a banyan tree? Raise your hand if you've seen a banyan tree before. No? Oh, you have. Okay, well, that's very nice. Well, banyan trees are gigantic trees. And they really look like they have roots and branches going in all directions. It's like entering a maze or a labyrinth. And so that's the analogy that we're going to come back to, is this labyrinth, being in this maze of the banyan tree, entangled in its branches, its roots, its vines, and things like that. We'll discuss that in a minute. So in text 3 and 4, the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with a weapon of attachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So this is a very, very powerful verse, and we're going to spend some time on this one too when we come back through. Text 5, those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, and who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender into the Supreme Person, they attain to that eternal kingdom. Okay, so text 6, who would like to pick it up from here?
Hare Krishna. That abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by electricity. One who reaches it never returns to this material world. Text 7. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. And text 8. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another as the air carries aromas. You want me to continue?
Yeah, please.
Text 9. The endeavoring transcendentalist who is situated in self-realization can see all this clearly, but those who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try to. Text 12. The splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me, and the splendor of the moon and the splendor of fire also from me.
Thank you. Very, very good. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And who else would like to pick it up in text 13?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, perfect.
All right, 13. I enter into a planet, and by my energy they stay in orbit. I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. I am the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities, and I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the 4 kinds of foodstuff. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Maybe one or two more.
All right. There are 2 classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. Besides these 2, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord himself, who has entered the 3 worlds and is maintaining them.
Very nice. Thank you. And who else wants to grab these last few? Rangavati, Bhavananda, somebody?
Okay, I got to get you off mute there. 18. Because I am the transcendental beyond both fallible and the infallible, because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as a supreme person. Whoever knows me as a supreme personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Rata. My pages aren't turning.
Yeah, beautiful.
20. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures, O sinless one, and it is disclosed now by me. Whosoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Very, very good. So this is a very short chapter, isn't it? But it's very potent if we stop and listen to what Krishna is saying here to Arjuna. Are there any questions at this particular point in time? Otherwise, we're going to go back to text 1 in this chapter and kind of analyze these as we go through them and discuss them. So please chime in if you have any questions at all about this. So in this first verse, this is a very important analogy. So the entanglement of the material world is compared here to the banyan tree. And for one who's entangled in their own karmic fruitive reactions, there is no end to the banyan tree. And just like you see monkeys in India jumping from one branch to the next, to the next, to the next, looking for whatever they can satisfy their senses with, it says we are engaged in the same way. We wander from one branch to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has no end. And for one who is attached to the tree, there's no possibility of liberation. So the Vedic hymns meant for elevating oneself, those are the leaves of the tree. Those are the leaves on the tree. And the tree's roots grow upward because they begin where Brahma is located, the topmost planet of the universe. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. So it's kind of like anything else. They say the cultivation of knowledge or vidya, avidya, simultaneously is very, very important. So just like in the last verse in the other chapter, Krishna was explaining, one should be aware of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease. So we're cultivating knowledge of why we don't want to be in this world. There are reasons for that, aren't there? The primary reasons are birth, death, old age, and disease. But there are many, many reasons. The hard struggle for existence is reason enough. Jivo jiva sajivanam is enough. That one living entity is the food of another. Yes, in the human species, we may have some relaxation from that. But if you look at the news, there are many people in the world who are not relaxed from that. They're being persecuted for their race. They're being persecuted for their creed. They're being persecuted for their differences in the world, their religion. They're being persecuted for their nationalism. Sometimes they're being persecuted for their family. I mean, there's so many things that we're being persecuted by other living entities. As a matter of fact, Krishna says in the second canto, or excuse me, the second chapter, Krishna explains that there are three kinds of miseries, right? Miseries caused by material nature, which we really can't do anything about, right? So we can be sitting here having a nice day, and all of a sudden a hurricane comes, tornado comes, volcano comes, the earthquake comes, right? The pestilence comes. That's other living entities or people who would murder, steal, rob, rape, do all these things that we find in the material world, or insects or bugs or animals that would like to eat you for dinner, right? Okay. But the worst kind of misery that comes to us is from our own independent action. Because what happens when we act independently, right, from Krishna, we develop karmic reaction. Those karmic reactions are both pleasurable and miserable and mixed. So when we get tired of those activities, so Krishna even says later in this chapter, he says, when one is through with lust. So remember in the last chapter, we're talking about the modes of material nature, and we talked about the mode of passion. The mode of passion is delicious. It's pleasurable in the beginning, but it causes ultimate misery in the end. Just like we see with illicit sex. Illicit sex in the material world, very, very pleasurable. Krishna says, I am sex life that's not contrary to religious principles. But we find that if we break those religious principles, there's unwanted progeny that come. And what happens? The prison houses are filled with people like that because they're not being raised, they're not being cared for, they're not being loved correctly, and they're not being educated correctly with this information. As a matter of fact, almost no one is being educated with this information in the material world. Therefore, everyone in the material world becomes addicted to the objects of their senses, right? We become addicted to that, and we think that's the purpose of life, to work hard like a hog, dog, camel, or ass to get a little something to eat, have a little sex life, be able to defend ourselves and have a nicer place to sleep. But even the animals have all this, and they're very satisfied with it. They're very satisfied. So if the animals have it, is that the ultimate goal of our life, to seek after those things? No. So Krishna says that these Vedic hymns are meant for elevating oneself. These are the leaves of the banyan tree. And they're meant for a person to understand these Vedic hymns, like the Gayatri mantra, the Maha mantra, so many other wonderful, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva. All these mantras that we know are designed to purify our heart, our soul, our karma, give us some meritorious behavior so that we can, in the eyes of God, become meritorious and desirable to the Lord as well. So the idea is that a person has to understand this tree of illusion. That's what Krishna is explaining. And then understand the process of extrication. The process of extrication, Prabhupada calls it. We have to extract ourselves from this illusion and place ourselves in a place of absolute truth, of reality. The reality is not these ever-changing three modes of material nature, right? The soul's interaction with the material energy in these three modes of material nature create all these varieties of bodies that we can live in these bodies. Mode of ignorance we talked about last time. You're talking about the animal species. And by the way, if you think animals are having a blast, they're afraid for their life at every moment because their predator is looking for them to have dinner every night. And if you go out into nature, sometimes you'll be able to see these things. At first, everything appears to be very, very beautiful, but there's death under every leaf in the material world. Something is being eaten alive under those leaves. Jivo, jiva, sajivanam. One food is the one living entity is the food of another. So your body, for an example, at some point could become the meal of vultures or animals of any description or worms or what. Right now you're being eaten alive. We're all being eaten alive. We're host to trillions of living entities who are feeding on us at every moment. We had some mosquitoes earlier today who were having a big feast on your one Gayatri Das right here. They were wearing me out. I didn't even know it. And those guys were leaving all plump. They could probably barely fly away. You see what I mean? And they're bloodsuckers. And they're there to enjoy my blood. So in the material world, lust means that I will associate with you as long as I can exploit you for my sense gratification. But when that exploitation is discovered or realized or whatever, or you don't allow me to have that exploitation any further, our friendship is immediately over. So our relationships in the material world are based on these material senses. And the mind is always trying to replace the object of the sense with the sense, right? And the intelligence is working overtime, trying to satisfy the false ego's desire to lord it over the material world. And to provide you with your bucket list, which is endless, by the way, just like the banyan tree is endless, right? No one can determine where it comes from or where it goes. Its roots go up, right? We know this. So in the same way, the ego and the mind and the intelligence are all working together to get the senses satisfied. Are the senses satisfied? Raise your hand if the senses are satisfied. No. I see a hand raised on mine, but there are no. Hey, Susan, there are no. Good to see you. There are no people who are satisfied for very long. Remember, we quoted the verse several times already, which is, "We do not take part. The wise person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are contact of the senses with their sense objects and are temporary in the material world and provide reaction for you." For your next body. Now, my friend and I, Bhakti Mason, he's around here somewhere, we were talking about the condition of the soul, which is mentioned, I think, in the 5th canto, if I'm not mistaken. I think this 5th canto about the soul being in the womb of the mother, locked in, floating upside down in the natal sac, in the fluid of the natal sac. And in that condition, he's very miserable. At one point, the soul folds the hands and begins to offer prayers to the Lord. You can see this in the pictures of the baby in the womb. Now that we have these ultrasound pictures, the baby is, after a few weeks, the misery is so intense, cramped in, and being bitten and scorched by various acids in the body and worms or whatever, amoebas or whatever might be in there. And the baby prays to the Lord. And he says, "Dear Lord, that if you'll let me out of this situation this time, I promise I will never forget you. I promise I will never forget you, and I will serve you once and for all." Okay? So the baby's praying for release from the womb. He's praying for the release of the misery at that point. And the baby goes in and out of consciousness due to the pain and the suffering. We think it's a beautiful thing, and it is miraculous. There's no question about it. But how does the baby come out? Baby comes squeezed out head first and is greeted in the material world with a hard smack. Its first breath, it gulps in air and releases it, crying and screaming in agony. Is this what you want? Is this what we want? No. But we easily forget it because the parents they're doting. They're taking care of the little baby. The baby realizes its importance to the parents. And all of a sudden, the false ego comes back and the baby begins to identify with the body. And we're raised in this conditioning in our life. And we're not being taught that we're not the body. Tato Brahma Jigasa, what am I? We don't know that. There's no school. They should open a college called Tato Brahma Jigasa. What am I? Where did I come from? Who put me here? Why am I here? What the heck am I supposed to be doing here? What can I do when I leave? Where can I go? What's on all these trillions of stars? Are they just vacant? Is my false ego telling me I'm the only one here? We're the only ones? I mean, come on. Really. It wouldn't make any sense. Mathematically, it's not even possible. It's not even in the remotest of possibilities that we're alone in a universe. It's not possible. So what we find out here is that people who live in the material world and are entangled in fruitive reactions sometimes go down to the hellish worlds. Sometimes they stay in the middle planetary, Earth planets, where we acquire our karma. We acquire our karma as humans. Your kitty cat is not acquiring karma, right? The amoebas are not acquiring karma. The demigods are not acquiring karma. They're living off the karma they did as a human being. This is described in this purport in the Vedic literature. I mean, in this chapter here, Krishna explains that. I mean, Prabhupada explains that this material world is a replica of the spiritual sky. Remember, we talked about it's being a shadow. It looks like the spiritual world, but it's not. We want to live forever. We want to live in a state of bliss. We want to live in the same body. We don't want to be separated from our loved ones. We don't want losses like death. We don't want losses of everything we've ever acquired and think we own. We don't want that. We want to live forever in the association of the supreme, most beautiful, wealthy, wise, famous, powerful person in a state of loving relationship or rasa in 5 different ways, right? We know what they are: neutral, servitude, friendship, parental, and then madhurya, ras. So in that of lover beloved. So we know that these relationships with God are there, and we're experiencing them in the material world in a shadow of that relationship. What we see here looks like it looks like the spiritual world. It is the kingdom of God, by the way. Even God's separate energies are the kingdom of God, right? So we know that. But they're inferior energies. They can never satisfy the soul. Never. The only thing that will satisfy the soul is uninterrupted, unalloyed, unmotivated, unconditional, devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the Srimad Bhagavatam that you were holding a minute ago gives you that in the first verse or 2 of that book. It explains that only uninterrupted devotional service can satisfy the soul. So we know that, right? So the idea is to understand this tree, understand the process of extraction from the tree, and not to be, enamored with the beautiful leaves of the tree or the fruits of the tree or this or that. We have nothing to do with this banyan tree known as the material world. Now, I will tell you that Prabhupada said we don't see in this world trees with their roots going up. So Prabhupada uses the analogy. Normally we don't. However, there are some cypress trees that we see their roots growing up, right? Banyan trees look like they're growing with their roots up and their branches downward. So, but Prabhupada used the example that if you stand next to a body of water that's very still, and you're on the edge of that, you can see yourself in reality, but you can see a reflection of yourself that's in the water. This material world is that reflection of you in the water. It's not your real self. Your real self is the spiritual self. This reflection that we see of the material world here, or the material body here, that is not you. Sorry. These are not your children. This is not your family. You've had millions of families. Yes, it's your obligation to maintain them. Make them pure devotees if you can. But they're not yours. These souls don't belong to you. You cannot own another person's soul. Right? So you can maintain their bodies and you can instruct them on the path of devotion or not. But this stuff is here. These souls all belong to God. And they're in your possession to care for them for a period of time. And then they're gone. Unless you go back to the spiritual sky together and your devotional service remains eternally. So that's the idea behind what we're talking about here. And I want you guys to kind of understand what that means. So are there any questions about that part first? So once again,
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have my hand raised. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you. I apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. You were talking about the miseries of birth and how the living entity is entrapped and being beaten and, scorched, and is praying to the Supreme Lord, if you get me out of this, I will serve you. And then when they come out, they're, covered in the illusion with the ego and everything. And I seen this video of a baby who was born and they slapped it and it didn't cry. It wouldn't wake up. and they rubbed it and they rubbed it. Oh, this video went on for about, I guess, about 5 or 10 minutes, and the baby just wouldn't wake up, and they were sucking the air from, doing the suction in the nose and the mouth, and then finally they just started putting a tube of oxygen right by the mouth, trying to get him to ingest the air. Long story short, the baby finally cried. What's going on with that? Why did that take so long for the baby to wake up?
Well, okay, those are details that are karmically nuanced. That's why it says no one can see where the tree comes or goes. Your illusion and your entanglement in this tree, this banyan tree that Krishna is talking about, goes back from time immemorial, maybe millions or even more births in all different species, and especially as human beings. We have misused our independence. We have a minor, little infinitesimal spark of free will, and that's all we have. Other than that, all we have is desire. So this whole thing is created by your desire. Everything that you get, everything that you have, everything that you'll ever receive is either coming to you as a result of your karma and your desire for that karma, or your desire to be with Krishna. So when you there's 3 kinds of karma, right? Good and bad and no karma. So no karma is the karma you want, and that's the karma you get by serving Krishna. Okay, devotional service. Krishna is very, very clear with that. You might remember Krishna's been very careful to describe this over and over and over again to us. Like in the 3rd chapter, in the 9th verse, Krishna says, "Yartat karma nonya cha loko yam karma bandhana tadartam karma kantaya mukta sangha samachara." So work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu or Krishna has to be performed. It's not a question, that it should be performed, or maybe you could do it, or maybe it's a good idea. No, it has to be performed. That's the actual Sanskrit word. It has to be performed. Otherwise, karma bandhana, we're bound to a network of these reactions that we will suffer and enjoy, and we have to have another material body to be able to experience that result. So the material body is a problem for the conditioned soul. First of all, the only reason you have a material body is because your identification with the material energy. If you did not identify with the material energy, you would be in Brahman consciousness. We just learned that from the last chapter that we read. Krishna explained that when a person gets over these attachments to the material, when he gets over all this pain and this pleasure and this desire for this and that, this unlimited desires, when a person finally is through with lust, then they can serve Krishna unmotivated and uninterrupted. And in that state, they can achieve that liberation and that love of God. When you associate with God, you are in the fire. When you call God's name, when you hear the Shastra, when you associate with a sadhu who's reminding you, of the Lord, when you take your prasadam every day, that's a devotional act. Everything you do in that very moment, that's when you can either be yogic or not. You can either take the result on your shoulders, if you would like that, or through intelligence, you can devote yourself and your energy and your life and your proclivity and some result of your work back to Krishna. Throughout all these chapters, Krishna has explained, if you can't do this, you can do that. If you can't do that, you can do this. And if nothing else, just give some of the results of your work to Krishna. And by doing that, you'll become purified and gradually elevate yourself to this form or this state of Krishna consciousness. So after one enjoys the results of these virtuous activities, even in the heavenly planets, they fall down. After they suffer the results of their miserable activity in the hellish planets, they come back. But we all come back to this human form of life. This is described carefully in the purports of this chapter, that the human form of life is the form of life that a person actually develops their karma. So we have to be aware of that situation. So now, this verse I just love this verse, and Prabhupada has quoted this verse. It's just such a profound verse. It's actually verse 3 and 4, right? So 3 talks about you can't perceive the form of this tree in the world, and no one can understand where it begins or where it ends or its foundation. That answers your question, Premanjali. And we don't know the answer why that baby's karma was that it almost died on the table. But we do know that Krishna explains in this chapter that you carry with you your karma, just like the wind or the air carries the aromas from one body to the next in various species of life, suffering, enjoying, and trying to raise a family, working hard to provide, and then becoming frustrated, getting diseased, growing old, and finally dying. Okay? That's the end result. And if you didn't use your life for Krishna, everything you did was in vain. Because you've lost it all now. Is that a wise investment? Would you make an investment if I came to you today and I said, hey, I've got a great investment. Give me your money, put in all your time and your energy, and then you're guaranteed to lose it all. Would you invest in that? Manjali's going, no. No one would invest in that. So why are we investing all of our time and our energy into this sense gratification in the material world when we know it won't satisfy? And also, the more you try to satisfy it, the higher the flame burns, right? What are the 9 gates to hell or whatever that is? Gluttony, sloth, lust, anger, greed, animosity, envy, or whatever it might be. All of that's there. You can open that gate and enter into the hellish conditions of life simply by your desire. So the whole purpose of the Vedas, the whole purpose of the Vedic hymns is to make you enlightened so you'll know what to do and what not to do. You'll know the truth from the illusion. You can separate the truth from illusion, or reality from illusion, as it's described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But here's the part I really like. So this part, it says that even though you can't understand what the foundation of the banyan tree is, you must, with determination, cut it down. You got to cut it down. The strongly rooted tree with a weapon of what? What is the weapon, y'all? Anybody know?
The weapon is devotional service.
Well, okay, but what does devotional service? Say it again.
Detachment.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
So when you're, Premanjali, when you're doing devotional service, you are completely detached from the material world. So your answer is correct as well. Krishna says that the weapon of detachment, you cut down the tree. But listen, we cannot be still, not even for a moment. Remember what Krishna said previously in the other chapters, that the soul is active. It can't be still even for a moment. So you have to be engaged in some kind of activity. And if you're not engaged in Krishna's service, you'll be engaged in the service of your senses. And if you do that, then once again, you are in trouble, right? You're in various degrees of pain and suffering, or happiness and distress. So we want to get out of that. So Krishna says, thereafter, one must seek, after you've cut down this tree with a weapon of detachment, you must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that supreme personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So that's our job. That's the job. Krishna gave you a job. Every soul, whoever hears this, has a job. What is it? Get your axe of detachment, sharpen your blade, and start chopping that tree down. Right? Because that's what's rooting you to these 3 modes, these 3 planetary systems, this eternal time, and the karma that ensues with it. Doesn't matter if you're in the higher planetary systems, you're going to lose it all. Doesn't matter. You may have a beautiful body, you may have a beautiful wife, you may have beautiful palaces, who knows? You may be a demigod, you may be able to fly around on your vambanas, and you may be able to have unlimited pleasures in the heavenly planets. But when you lose them all, will that be a happy day? So knowing that your ultimate demise is coming, the devotee is always aware of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease. Rangavati, you got a question?
Yeah, I just had a thought. You were saying about being detached. So the opposite to being detached is attached. So we're attached to our family, our country, our town, our house, attached to our car, all those things. Now, what is it when we're attached to our children and they're devotees?
Well, that's Krishna conscious. As a matter of fact, Prabhupada said one should aspire to have hundreds of children if he can make them pure devotees.
So that's not entangling if you're attached to your children or your husband or something who's a devotee.
Okay, so right, look in your pocket, pull out a coin, and on one side is heads and on the other side is tails, right? Same coin, right? Same coin. But when you flip it, if it's tails, you lose, right? If it's heads, you win, right? So the idea is this. This material world is like the tail side of that coin. You're going to lose. But the head side is you use everything for Krishna. So detachment is a double-edged sword. The other side of detachment is attachment, right? Right? Vidya, avidya, right? Up, down, good, bad, happiness, distress, loss, gain, victory, defeat, right? Spiritual, material, right? Devotional service, and Maya, right? The absolute truth and the illusion. It's all the opposite sides of the same coin. Same coin. So that coin, you can use that coin to buy your entrance to the spiritual world if you use everything for Krishna. Then the same things that were causing you the pain and the suffering and the repeated birth and death and old age and all the things you hate, when you start using that for Krishna, all of that becomes your source of liberation. You know, you might remember back when Louis Pasteur came up with this penicillin, right? And he found a cure, you know, but he used the actual, I guess, the bacteria to create the cure, right? The thing that's causing the problem can also give you a cure. And there are many examples of that in this world, right? Sometimes the medicines to treat, say, a snake bite, which would cause poison and death, is made from the same venom, but it cures you of the snake bite. So in the same way, if you're currently using your family for your own private sense gratification, you don't realize that all that belongs to God, and that's a great gift of the Lord, and the Lord's given that to you so that you can offer it back in gratitude and watch them grow in their spiritual characteristics in their life, those characteristics that we read in the previous chapter, where we talked about all of this detachment and so forth and so on. We read those qualities over and over. And I recommend you go back through that and read those qualities, because those are the qualities of a liberated soul. And you can test that against whoever you want to and find out if that person is actually advanced or not. And when you test those qualities against Srila Prabhupada, he passes in every case. When you use those, say, against Christ or someone like that, they pass in every case. But when you use it against folks in the material world like us, we see, oh, I may have 3 or 4 of the qualities. These I need to work on. These are ones I've got a partial amount of. So we have to go through that ourselves every day and test ourselves against those qualities to find out if we do that. So to gain
I'm sorry, where are they found?
In the previous chapter, the 3 modes of material nature. We read them together last week. I'm going to recommend you go back to that and you guys read through that or listen to the last class, and you'll hear those. We went through them very, very carefully. Okay. So, and you can go back to any one of these classes that you want to and go back through it, and you'll see that just like Prabhupada is always reiterating these basic principles of spiritual life, the foundations that you have to build, you know, yourself and your character on. Prabhupada repeats them all the time. I remember back in the 70s, a lot of devotees, they kind of wanted to get on into the way esoteric stuff and this and that. And Prabhupada said, first, you have to know you're not your body. You don't even know that. So now you want to go to the Rasa dance. You want to talk about, come on. We're nonsense rascals, right? So we just want to misuse all this because we're used to doing that. We're cheaters and the cheated, right? The whole thing is cheaters and the cheated. 99.99%. Where do you find the pure devotee? Prabhupada was a pure devotee. Test it. See about it for yourself. I spent 50 years. I can't find a flaw. I can't find it. And the Bhagavad-gītā has answered every question I've ever wanted. And I can assure that most of the problems in life, or almost all the problems in life, can be dealt with and satisfied by understanding the words of Krishna in the Bhagavad-gītā. Mahatma Gandhi said that when I'm at my lowest point and I have no hope left at all and no hope in the world, I open the Bhagavad-gītā and I find brand new hope. I find brand new realization, and I find brand new truth that I can base my life upon instead of this constant upheaval of the three modes of material nature and their interaction with everybody's karma and the birth and the death and the hellish, accidents and stuff. People wonder, why are people born deformed? Why are they born poor? Why are people born, with disease? Why are they born in a country where there's a dictator persecuting their family and their people, killing everyone? Why are they born into war? Why are they born into these situations? Is it that God's so mean he doesn't like that person? And for some reason he likes this other person better, and therefore he gives them a better arrangement? No, Krishna says he's equal to everyone. But those who are a friend in him, he is a friend in them also. See? So our point is we give ourselves to Krishna in full surrender. And then whatever comes, we accept it as better than we deserve. Our karma, man, if we took our karma, we get token karma after we surrender to Krishna. You cut your finger, but you should have lost your arm. You see what I'm saying? So in that state, we're always grateful. At every moment, we're grateful. We're thanking the Lord for whatever we get. Even if it's difficulty, we're saying to the Lord, yes, you're communicating with me in this way. I'm trying to understand what you're saying. I'm so ignorant, so small, and so my ability is not there. Please glance upon me, Lord, with your kind glance and give me. You are knowledge, forgetfulness, and remembrance. He just said that. Well, give me remembrance of you. Who was it, the great devotee in the Srimad Bhagavatam said, the Lord said you can have anything you want, whatever boon you want. He said, all I ask is that you allow me never to forget you. Queen Kunti said that too. That I never forget you. You can send unlimited miseries all you want. All I'm asking is never let me forget you.
I'm sorry, Gayatri Das, can I interrupt you?
Yep.
Please. So we have some gurus that, well, not gurus, one in particular, that his deformity and his illnesses and the things that he's suffering with, as far as his material body, is that the result of his karma or the karma of his disciples?
No. Now you're talking about Jayapataka. Who are you talking about exactly? Jayapataka. No, Jayapataka is literally, there's a soul. I think it's Vasudeva. I can't remember in the Vedas. He said, "Give me everyone's karma. Let them go back to the spiritual world and live in paradise with you eternally. I will suffer in hell on their behalf." That's Jayapataka Maharaj. Jayapataka Maharaj. We're talking about one of Prabhupada's dearest disciples who has got, I don't know, tens of thousands, maybe 50 or 100,000. It's hard to say how many disciples he's got. But just like Prabhupada came and initiated so many people who were addicted to heroin and this and that and fell down or whatever, Prabhupada took that misery on their behalf. But we should understand that he's willing to do that. But Krishna absolves all of that because of his desire to please the Lord and engage these souls in his service. So that karma, it's absolved. It's burnt to ash. Burnt to ash. So what you're seeing with Jayapataka is it's not his karma. No, of course not. He has no karma. Jayapataka Maharaj is virtually pure devotee. Because everything he does is dedicated to Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. As far as I know, he is a pure devotee.
Yes.
I understand.
Yes.
So my point to you is this: there's no karma for a pure devotee. What
Mhm.
they're doing is enjoying that rasa with their spiritual master and with Krishna. And in that case, there may be suffering. We saw the life of Christ, for an example. He's hanging on a cross, but he hadn't forgotten his Father.
Mm-hmm.
I submit myself, my spirit to your hands. This forgive them. They know not what they do. So this whole attitude is the attitude of great souls like Jesus Christ, Jayapataka Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada, so many other great devotees who are giving their heart and soul and their life every day in sacrifice for the satisfaction of their guru. And those devotees, we take the dust of their feet on our head because that's purifying. Wherever they go is a holy place. It becomes a place of pilgrimage. Wherever their feet were standing, that ground is transcendental. That's a holy. That's why Vrindavan is so holy. Krishna came there. Now you go there, you can become purified. The Ganges River flows over the toe of Krishna. Therefore, you can become purified. So all of these things that the Lord is giving to us, the holy names, the prashadam, the devotional activities, all of that, the scriptures, everything is meant for our benefit. If we know that Krishna is the origin of everything, then we surrender ourselves to the Lord. Okay? One only has to surrender. That's all. And you can do it by hearing, chanting, taking nice prasad, coming to these classes, reading the Bhagavatam, keeping your mind fixed on the Lord throughout your life. And then you'll get out of this entanglement, the strong banyan tree of the material life. And in that surrender to Krishna, you become detached automatically from this material extension of the material world, because no longer is it a material world to you. You've entered the spiritual world because everything you do is of a spiritual nature. The offering is burned in the sacrificial fire of your gift to the Lord, of your consciousness. It's burned up. So there is no karma for you to suffer or enjoy. You're headed home. You're a soul that's headed home, and soon you'll be back home to Godhead. So here's the big issue, y'all. And we're running out of time, and we always do. It seems like we just get started and then we're out of time. Okay, but that's because we can go on and on and on and on and on and on, discussing these wonderful relishable topics and philosophies and words that comes out of the mouth of God. But let me leave you with a couple of things that I think that you'll like. One is Krishna says in the fourth chapter in the 9th verse, Janma karma chamedivyam ivam yo veti tatvatha. Chaktva deham panarjanma. Naitimam eti sorjana. So one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving this body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains to my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Of this there is no doubt. Krishna guarantees you won't come back to the material world, but you have to know who he is. You need to know that his body is never material, he's spiritual. All of these things that we've learned from the beginning of the Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna has explained over and over and over again to us. Why he comes, Prichanaya Saranam Vinashaya Chaduskriptam. He's killing the demons, he's establishing the devotees. He comes, you die, he comes over and over again, millennium after millennium, to save us. And he says in this particular verse, which I just love this verse, because Krishna lays it out thick here. He said, those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who are done with material lust, and who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who know, unbewildered, know how to surrender to the Supreme Person, attain to the eternal kingdom. In every chapter, Krishna's telling us what we have to do over and over again to attain the eternal kingdom. It's a matter of us doing that. So the surrendering process is the process of extrication from the banyan tree, the labyrinth of the banyan tree, the material world. That is the chopping it down. Becoming surrendered to Krishna is the axe that chops down the banyan tree. Right? You got to get over thinking you're the Lord of material nature. You got to understand that you're a servant. Right? And that we owe everything, the land, the people, the human society, the plants, the animals, everything. We're here to take care of these things. And we have to be free from the false notion that we're a proprietor of anything. You're the proprietor of your desire. Bottom line, done, finished. What else do you own? Nothing. Man proposes, God disposes. You're coming up with the stuff, and God's giving it to you. He's recommending you don't do it, but you're doing it anyway because you're not listening to the Lord. Not you, everybody, me, everybody. We're all guilty of this. We've all fallen short, and the wages of that activity is repeated birth and death. So that's the idea. So what I want to do real quick before we end this call is I wanted to read this one to you, and I don't know if I can get to it or not here. Hold on. These electronic things are almost harder to do than anything else. Have you ever noticed that? So he says at the end of this chapter, in text 19, he says, whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service. Krishna says you're the knower of everything. First of all, he says, asamudha. Asamudha means without a doubt. Don't be a mudha. Be without a doubt, right? Asamudha. You know the Purusha Uttamam, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You know that Sa Sarvavit, that he is you become the knower of everything. And you budgety, you render devotional service unto the Lord in all respects. So, guys, our job is to know God. That's the only job that's important in the material world. What do they say? One thing you're guaranteed to do is pay taxes and die. How's that feel? Is that what you come here to do? Was that your purpose in life? Is that the ultimate goal? Right? No. So your job is to know God. And by coming to this program tonight, you have shown Krishna that you're very, very interested in knowing him. And by knowing the Lord, you're guaranteed to be transferred to the spiritual world. I've got so much more I want to tell you guys, but I think we're running out of time. And I just don't want to go any further. So please, if you don't mind, if you have any questions, ask them now, because we are at 8:02. So any questions, comments?
I don't have a question, but I would like to comment because
Sure.
it really does tie into what we're talking about with the banyan tree and stuff. So I've been reading this, the Sri Ispanosad.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, good stuff. So mantra 11, I would highly suggest you check it out. I won't read the whole thing, of course, but there's one thing that I highlighted, and it says, no one wants to die. This is the purport, by the way.
Okay.
No one wants to die, nor does anyone want to become old or diseased. The laws of nature, however, do not allow anyone immunity from old age, disease, or death. Nor has the advancement of material knowledge solved these problems. Material science can discover the nuclear bomb to accelerate the process of death, but it cannot discover anything that can protect man from the cruel hands of old age, disease, and death. So I just loved that. So I just thought I'd share. I read that earlier today, and it just kind of tied in with what we were talking about. So
I love that. Well, that's actually what it is. I mean, there is no cure for death. The only cure for death is the holy name of the Lord. It says anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved, right? So when you call on the name of the Lord, you burn up more sins than you've been able to commit in all your millions of lifetimes. So it says even if you chant one time, or you come into the association of the pure devotee one time, take the remnants of that food stuff. you become eternally benefited from that, and now you're on the right trajectory, headed back home, back to Godhead, and the Lord will protect you. What to speak of the devotees who are chanting Hare Krishna every day, and are constantly praying and chanting and reading the Shastra like that, and then offering their families, offering the results of their activities to the Lord, and supporting those devotees who are out changing the world and giving this information to the souls of the world, because that's very, very, very important. So what does Krishna say about those yogis? He says, Yoginam api sarvesham mat katenantaratmana shradavan bhajate yomam sa me yuktat mano mataha. So he says, of all the yogis, is Susan here? Still here with us, Susan? Do you have to go?
She's just left.
Oh, of all yogis, he has always advised me with great faith, worshiping me in transcendental loving service, is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So there can be no doubt that when we offer ourselves in full surrender to the Lord, that the Lord's got you. He's already got you. Already everything is being taken care of. Imagine how much more wonderful it will be when you give yourself back to that Creator, who is the source of your very life, the source of your sustenance, the source of your energy, the source of light in the world, the source of the taste, the food, the water, the light, air, name it. Sankhya Yoga. Look under every rock. Krishna's right there. He's not going anywhere. So you can be Krishna conscious. We went through the universal form, the opulence of the absolute. Go back to those chapters, and you'll see how Krishna has come to you in so many wonderful ways. And all you have to do is acknowledge the Lord in all things.
Gayatri, that spiritual madness is a bewildering concept to me.
Spiritual madness?
Yeah, where their hair grows, they have long beards, long hair, they don't bathe, they put dust on themselves. That bewilders me because I have OCD. I've got this cleanliness thing. I shared that with you when I first met you. So that bewilders me.
Well, there are many paths. And just like if you're at the base of a mountain, it's really a long way around. But when you get to the top, it's one point. Mm-hmm. So no matter where you start over here, I start over here. We're heading up the mountain. We were just talking about how many paths Jeremiah had been through and how he's been brought to this information. So whatever's happening to you, as long as you're doing it and you're seeking the kingdom of God, all things are going to be added to you in due course of time. All things. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to worry about it. Krishna's got your back. He's going to protect you. And if he calls you home, it's like the kitty cat taking the baby cat in the mouth, not the kitty cat taking the mouse in the mouth. Mm-hmm. There's a difference. Mm-hmm. All right. Any other points or questions real quickly, y'all?
You were giving this description of the perfect yogi, and he doesn't have to be naked with a long beard and covered in ash. Mm-hmm. It also includes spiritual master, Pramanjali. He's the perfect yogi. Absolutely. Yes, they called it, Gayatri said different paths. There's different ones. So
they called this spiritual madness is what they called it. And I was reading about it and it just bewildered me. Yeah, some people.
I'd have to know more about that to talk specifically to what you're talking about, Pramanjali, and we'll do that the next time you and I have a chance to talk. But just know that if you look at yoga throughout all history, there are people who are standing in water this deep that's freezing cold, and they're doing austerities for years and years and years. There are people who are in caves, their nails have grown around in circles. You go to Magh Mela, Kumbh Mela in India, you're going to see people who might even be hundreds or even thousands of years old. So There's all kinds of stuff going on here. The one verse that Krishna says, by all the Vedas I'm to be known. What is that? Veda Krit, Veda Vid. Well, anyway, I think it's the 15th verse in this particular chapter. Let me see if I can find it. Avachaham. Vedanta Krit Veda Vid Avachaham. In other words, I'm to be known by all of the Vedas, right? So everybody's trying to know Krishna. They're doing it in different ways. Some people are doing it on the impersonalistic path, right? Seeking the impersonal Brahman. Some are doing it on this personal path of devotional service. In previous yugas, it was, Ashtanga yoga or elaborate temple worship or whatever it might be, great sacrifices. In this one, it's Harinama, Harinama, Harinama Eva Kevalam. Kalo, that means Kali. Kali Yuga, we just have to call on God's name. It's the easiest time you're going to have getting back home, back to Godhead is in the Kali Yuga. Even the demigods are envious of the fact that we get out of here so easy because Nityananda and Chaitanya are giving us this unlimited mercy, unconditionally offering it to us without really demanding much, except for just calling on the name of God. Not a problem. So, I don't know.
Brock has just joined us.
Who's that?
Brock has just joined us.
Okay, good to have you. You're at the very last moment. We're just getting ready to hang up on you, buddy.
I was afraid of that. I was hoping I would catch you.
I'm so happy to see you, though. So this last verse, Brock, says, this is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures. That's what Krishna's given Arjuna just then. And he said, and it is disclosed now by me to you. And whoever understands this will become wise, and his endeavors will know perfection. Think about that one, bro. You got to read this chapter and go back over this now, okay? And let me know what you think when you finish, all right? I'll be waiting.
Okay.
Be waiting to hear from you.
I'll do that.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us again. We're on the 15th chapter tonight. There's only 18 chapters. We've only got 3 more to go. Stick with us. Let's stay the course. And then we'll start Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll have some fun with some really wonderful stories that will illustrate these characteristics that we've been talking about, this philosophy that we've been talking about in this Bhagavad-gītā. Okay?
Okay.
Jai, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Jai.
Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, Hare Krishna.